Hello and welcome to another Daily Muppet. In today's video, I want to talk about the shift and the new approach to cost strategy that new leadership have taken, which has of course resulted in changes in the center back targets, as well as between yesterday and today, a change in the midfield approach and targeting as well, with United for now at least moving on from Manuel Ugarte as the top target and exploring alternatives. We'll talk about some of those alternatives, including Berge. I think there's a couple different ways you can pronounce it according to him himself. I'll do Berge because it's a lot easier to say for me. And we'll go from there, talk about Scott Mctominay, as well as a bit more. So let's get right into it. First and foremost, one of the things that I was mentioning quite a lot in yesterday's video about Matthijs de Ligt was this point on cost, how the approach from the new leadership is pretty simple, and from Omar Barada is, we have a price that we value a player at, and we don't go above that, and we don't sign the player if it doesn't meet that value. There was even some people who aggregated that somewhat incorrectly or out of context to say, they'd rather sign nobody than spend 50 million on de Ligt. Kind of true, but kind of within context. The point was they're not going to just overpay. You see, they're not just going to pay over the price just to get someone in the door. They do have their valuations that they're going to stick to. We've seen this a few times already. Gerard Braithwaite was far and away the top target in the center back, kind of separately to Lenny Yoro. Those were the two different profiles, two different positions in a sense. And they set their limit. They always looked at it as ideally they'd get him at 50 million. I think that was about what they valued him at. They did a first offer lower, second offer that got that high, and then they walked. They weren't going to bow and say, yep, 70 million, fine, we'll pay just because he's our top target. There's positives and negatives to this approach. Short-term pain, long-term gain, understandable. It's a bit of a balance here because sometimes you just got to pay the price. But I guess the point being is that they're basing it not on financials, but on, for them, valuations relative to other players, and they'll be building that out and looking at players all around Europe and saying, well, that's what that one's worth, and this is how we value them. And so in that respect, it makes sense because then you get the most from your money for valuation, as long as you have those alternative targets. One of the things I do think is that if they were in earlier, specifically, Dan Ashworth and Barada and all of that, that they would be able to have lined things up a little bit more. We've gotten two good signings in the door, two great signings that I think are on great value for the youth and potential that they bring, but just two signings. And we haven't addressed the midfield. We, with Lenny Yoro now undergoing surgery on that metatarsal, we don't have a lot into the first team different to last year. Now, a huge part of last year's struggles, and certainly what is making people feel as though our team was a lot worse than it is, has been those injuries, for sure. In the front line, it's kind of funny to look at this way, but we have Jadon Sancho, Amad Diallo, and Joshua Zirkzee. We've added three players that really didn't play much last year, in part due to injuries or disputes, and then the signing. So it's almost a full overhaul of the front line, interestingly enough. But in the back line, it's a little bit concerning. And in the midfield, we haven't really changed anything, although having Kobbie Mainoo all season with Bruno and Mount not being out all season does actually add quite a lot. Between Mount and Mainoo, they missed more than half, both missed more than half the season, I think, right? In the end. So that's a big difference too. So there's a lot of positive additions, not excusing the lack of signings, because we really, it will be a bit of a different team, even if we signed nobody else versus what we fielded last year. But we do need to do more business. And I said before that they've been working on things for a long time. Early on, they were making contacts, they were moving forward on transfers and such, but of course, the main guys were not in. The financials have been tight, and I think they're a little bit behind because some of these decisions certainly you would have hoped to make a bit earlier. Now, nobody else is really making big moves in the Premier League in terms of the top clubs. So United, I think, have still strongly gained ground on where they were last season relative to the competition. Aston Villa made a lot of big moves, is one I would worry about most of all in terms of improving. But otherwise, United have done pretty well here. Relative to other teams, and PSR has certainly thrown a wrench in that. But with those PSR concerns come certainly this new approach. Don't overpay for players. And I can understand that, aspect of it. It would have gotten us, a lot of the trouble that we're having in moving players on, as I was saying yesterday, is due to overinflated fees and wages that we've paid in the past just to get the deals done. The Antonys, we paid too much for Maguire, paid too much for Wan-Bissaka over our valuations. But, obviously that comes at the cost of you have to have competent alternatives. But it is a good thing so long as they get good players in. So with Ugarte, the situation was he was, in fact, our top target, and we were focused on him. You don't need an exclusive from David Ornstein saying we've shifted if we haven't been looking at him and weren't pursuing him. But he did, and, there was new talks set to occur this week. It sounds like those have happened, and our hope and expectation was that, especially with paying 60 million euros for João Neves, that PSG would go down, and fair play to Duncan Castles, because he said we were close to around 50 and they wanted 60. Well, that's 10 million and we walk away from it, and that makes sense. We were never going to pay 60 million. I think I've made that clear a number of times on Ugarte, and we shouldn't. If they're buying João Neves for 60 million euros and they're trying to dump Manuel Ugarte, who they bought for 60 million euros, he should be under 50. He should. And if they're not willing to lower that price, then for sure, United to walk. And the thing I think I'd mentioned was that the loan plus obligation option actually looked more expensive. I think it was going to be like a significant loan fee plus 50 next year. So in the end, it ends up costing 60 plus. So that was, I think, concerning there too. They really hadn't given a good price. And it's kind of weird with that because, again, when you're signing his replacement for 60 million euros and you're saying he's out of your plans, well, you can't turn a profit on the player if you're saying that he was a disappointment. So Ornstein obviously got to that yesterday, was updated, whatever, on that they've not changed their tune on the price, and so the progress had not been made following more talks, and United were looking at alternative options now. That's fine with me. I really like Ugarte, but it's not like I agree with the general strategy. I really like Gerard Braithwaite, but I agree with the general strategy of moving on if it's just above the valuation, as long as you have good alternatives. My concern here is now, what do we got following Manuel Ugarte? Now, could we return to Ugarte? Yes. If PSG come back and say, okay, fine, 50 million euros and he's yours, then I think we'll go back to it and get it done if we haven't made another signing. But we're not going to wait around for that to happen. I think that's the point, is we're not going to sit there and just keep playing this game and then hopefully whoever blinks first. We don't want to play those types of games anymore. We've done it, and we always blink. And we pay 80 million for Antony, and we pay 80 million for Maguire. We always blink. So that's a good change. In terms of the midfield targets, I do have a little bit of information on at least Sander Berge. The other names that have been mentioned, obviously Zubimendi. Problem there is 60 million euros release clause. We won't pay that. It's not the value that we have him at. We can't afford that, and I don't think we want to pay that. So that would be the concern. There'd have to be a better deal on the table for Zubimendi, who is admired. Fofana, a backup option. Price kind of doubled, it feels like, as we got involved and held the AC Milan up as well. I don't know. This one's a strange one. I'm not totally convinced United really want him, but they have looked. That hasn't gone anywhere. He's a very different player. He's certainly much more aggressive. I think if you were going to go for someone like him, you could have gone for Onana earlier on from Everton. I don't know. It's just something about the Fofana thing doesn't quite always add up to me. But certainly United have looked. I don't know anything else more about that, unfortunately, to say. He's very different as a midfielder, though, in his play, in getting on the ball and being aggressive and going forward. Zubimendi can sit a bit and pass the ball around. Ugarte is definitely defense first. The other name, Sander Berge, same thing. He's a defensive first midfielder. I mean, he's a very disciplined defender. I wouldn't say his attacking traits are his best traits. He's a disciplined and strong defender. He's got big size. He's very mobile, and he's competent with the ball. That's an interesting one, this Sander Berge one, because again, fair play to Duncan Castles, who linked him first, and I think that's been backed up by The Athletic. And let me see. Let me just make sure I say this right. The info that I have on where it's at right now. Not groundbreaking, but pretty straightforward. So from my context, the understanding was that at this time there was just exploration and interest. They'd contacted his camp, but there was no commitment made from either side to a deal as of yet. What I mean by that is United have not told him, hey, we're going to approach Burnley and start to try to get a deal done. Are you willing to come? These would be kind of the terms and conditions, all of that. They've not had those discussions as of yet. On his side, in those talks, he feels he's got potential other options. Everybody feels United have other options. Everybody's looking at it basically at this stage. The context have been, where are you at? What's your situation? Beyond that, not much. So it's early doors, and that's why I say I think United are probably a little bit behind right now, because they don't have a midfielder totally lined up. And part of the problem is budget, of course, which we'll talk about. I want to talk about Scott McTominay in a minute. That being said, it doesn't have to take forever for these deals to occur. If they decided to go for Sander Berge and they said, hey, would you be willing to join? I'm sure he would say yes. They just haven't had these conversations in that detail as of yet. And there are potentially other clubs that could come in for him, including in the Premier League. So, I don't think they've settled yet on what to do, but have just made those kind of initial contacts around. And maybe it'll be a surprise, but we don't really have any solid names, do we? Beyond Sander Berge, we don't have much in terms of other solid names of who's been contacted. And I can't remember now who Duncan Castles linked us to. In the other respect, I'll look this up while I'm talking here, because I feel like there was one other name. There was talk of Rabiot. But I don't think that. But from United side, they've certainly played that one down a little bit. That there has been contact, but it's unlikely to be, the one. Here's what he said. He said, begun to look at alternatives to Manuel Ugarte, Zubimendi, but a high release clause. Joey Veerman. So that was the other name. That was what I was trying to remember. A name that we hadn't really discussed. I know nothing about him, but obviously playing at PSV, a lot of the people at United will know a lot about him. I don't know anything about him, but certainly given the news on Sander Berge being correct and United starting to look at difference to Ugarte and alternatives, I guess Veerman is someone that we should look at. He looks like statistically somebody who's incredibly high volume passer, progressor, playing at PSV. I mean, that's not really quite a surprise, is it? Just stylistically, the type of players that they have. So I guess that's one we should probably watch as well. I don't know who they're going to go for at this point in time, but I do know that it's not yet in an advanced state with Berge. But as with the Ugarte thing, these things can now happen rapidly. This is kind of the last week before we're into the real season training. So obviously there's still time in the window, but I guess things could move pretty quick. So today, they could then contact one of these and say, okay, we want to sign you. Let's get going. But Zubimendi, the price would need to come down. And we'll talk about Scott in a minute, because potentially it's more affordable, more doable if other things occur. But I guess we keep an eye on Berge, Veerman, Fofana until someone else. I don't know. The other names that I do have talked about before, João Gomez in the past, Yeoman, we'll see. Yeoman seems like he's out of reach at this point, but we'll see if they return back and look at some of those. João Gomez is a pretty similar player stylistically to Ugarte. Again, a defend first player. Yeoman obviously kind of playing in the role like Ugarte did before at Sporting and like Palhinha did before him. So I'd be interested to see if they go for those or return to look at those that they watched through the year. But otherwise, most of the time I get information on who they're looking at through the year to make these kind of decisions. Hence with the center backs on Braithwaite and Euro and all that. So it's a little harder for me to gather this or at least be ahead on this. I'm sure I will not be first on telling you who we're pursuing in the midfield at this point, unless I get lucky with something on Berge or something like that. But yeah, interesting situation, up in the air. Those are more affordable options, I would guess, like a Veerman, a Berge, a Fofana, probably in the 30 million bracket, somewhere around there. So, maybe those are a lot more doable this summer. And I wouldn't be against, getting like, I don't always love using these terms, but sometimes they just are easiest to explain things. Getting a floor raiser for this summer, because I think the floor with Casemiro is underground right now. And then next summer going big. Maybe they're not convinced of a top target this year, so get an affordable, good, solid defensive player. And then next year go big, like we said, maybe an Adam Wharton next year or something like that. So yeah, there seems to be kind of the approach, but definitely, whoever they go for, it's going to have to be good value. On to Matthijs de Ligt and Mazraoui continues. We're kind of still waiting for them to finalize this Wan-Bissaka thing. As we talked about yesterday, we got more reports that they were kind of closing in. West Ham are trying to finish the deal. I don't know exactly what the holdup is now. Probably none. But ideally that gets done in the next few days and United can get Mazraoui in this week. And then they'll make a new offer for De Ligt and again, or likely. But Bayern are similar to the Ugarte thing, similar to the Braithwaite thing. I cannot repeat this enough. Bayern have to be more reasonable on the fee or they will just not do it. They just won't see the value, and that's the approach. And so teams have to stop assuming that United are going to pay, because they're not. No one's paying 60 million for Ugarte, promise that, and nobody will be paying this 50 million for De Ligt right now, or they would have already. He's been available all summer. Nobody's come in, so is what it is there. But I expect that. Well, obviously, they're intending to make a new offer this week on that. On Mctominay, I mentioned yesterday some concerns about his potential wanting to, maybe not so much wanting to leave, or concerns about potentially joining Fulham, I should say more specifically. And, I've been kind of exploring this because it's a bit of a funny one here where I'm running into a little bit of contradictory information myself. From the club's perspective, Fulham believe he would like to join and believe that the role that they have on offer is a good one. United, I don't think, have been in a situation of like pushing him out the door or saying he's staying or anything, but they're just looking. He has been exploring deals and places to go. He has for most of the summer and before. Where could he go? What options does he have? I'm led to believe at the moment that if he got a new contract to stay in kind of a rotation role, he would prefer that to joining Fulham. I don't think United are keen on giving him that new contract. I think he would prefer Galatasaray over Fulham. They've made a really good offer to him. They have Champions League football, but they're not going to be able to make that offer to United, so that doesn't really open the door there. I would see it's probably semi-similar to kind of the Wan-Bissaka thing, where if Fulham come in and make a deal, it'll be, look, you take that deal and you move to Fulham, or you ride the bench and there's no new contract. I think that's probably the play from United's standpoint and where they're approaching it. And it'll probably work. I wouldn't say the door is totally shut for McTominay to join Fulham or anything like that. That's not what I'm trying to say with this. It's just that there's some concern from people fairly close to the player that maybe he's not so keen on that move. Could that hold it up? I don't know. Fulham will probably have more direct conversations, and at the same time, maybe get somebody else to come in for him. But I still think he'll move, but it's complex, right? Fulham need to make that better offer. He would need to accept it and make that move, and I don't think either are necessarily guaranteed at this point in time. And that and Casemiro staying has a huge impact on our summer budget, especially in the midfield and what we want to spend and can spend there. So that's why I think, maybe okay, those more budget players this summer might be more feasible at this point in time. If we could sell Scott McTominay, then maybe we could move for Zubimendi if we value him at that price. I'm not sure we do, but if we value him at that price, he'd become more feasible to pay for him then. So this is just one to watch. I think that it's not like a dire situation or something where he can't go. It's just if they come in and they agree that deal, then United are going to have to give him a bit of a push out the door to Fulham if nobody else is presenting themselves forward with a feasible offer. Yeah, but it's kind of that tricky thing when players are running closer to the end of their contract. Same with Wan-Bissaka, where they look at it and say, if I wait, I could just choose where I want to go. So he could choose to go to Galatasaray, for example, later on, if they still want him. That's the risk on the player side. And get more wages and Champions League football and all that. So it's an interesting situation. It is. I'm not sure exactly how it plays out, but I just wanted to share everything that I could on that of note. So I think, yeah, we'll see if Fulham come back from these talks with their third offer, which I think United expect they will. Then they'll have to kind of give McTominay a bit of a push out the door, I think, to get this deal over the line. And hopefully that doesn't hold up Fulham from making that offer. I would hope it doesn't. So that's what I've got. Obviously, fluid situation now, as we're kind of, boom, looking at Ugarte, price doesn't come down, move on. Well, we'll see about Matthijs de Ligt if the same thing happens this week or not, because he could be in a similar boat. At this point, I would very much, I've said before, I would very much take de Ligt if it's a 40 million thing. I still have concerns about how that all works time-wise with Euro when he comes back, because, as fans, all of us, we're going to be clamoring. We want Lenny Euro to play. But anyway, regardless, I would take him at a good budget price. But we'll see. We'll see if Bayern are more reasonable on this. It would be good to definitely get another center back in. Again, Maguire's fine. He'll likely play with Lissandro at the weekend, I would imagine, and on opening weekend as it stands right now, which I think would be okay. So that's what we've got. We'll keep updated as things move on through the week. Thank you all for watching. We'll do one of the watch along for the on that platform for the Community Shield, as well as the opener of the league and all of that. So I'm really looking forward to watching more games together. It was a lot of fun for people. The hours will be a lot easier for all of you in the UK than during this US tour. So hopefully you can come hang out with me there. But thank you all for watching. The podcast with Phil will be tomorrow. And make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications on, and I'll see you in the next video.